I'm focused on his spirit cause it keeps me from his fire. The Holy Ghost was with me, so my fear I leave behind. My sins were all diminished when he took that breath and died. And if you think I'ma give up on my God, the devil is a lie. The devil is a lie. The devil is a lie.
Oops, sorry. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about what we wanted to talk about yesterday. And Julian Michaels went on CNN, and they were talking about how Trump had appointed some people to look at the Smithsonian and what they were teaching. And so the folks at CNN had an issue with it, and people were having an issue with it. And Julian Michaels laid out, like, hey, some of the stuff is really focused on, like, racial CRT, alternate kind of history. And she had some facts to back it up. They didn't really let her talk a lot about it. But I love this topic because it gives me an opportunity to remind you all what the African American History Museum did during 2020 when white guilt and privilege and critical race theory was all the rage, and they made their whiteness infographic. And I love being able to talk about it. Also, we're going to be talking about DC and how the Democrats are just like terrible with this narrative, with the crime, and whether Trump should be there and the National Guard should be there working with the police. Of course, there's the DOJ person who threw the sandwich at the troops or whatever, which was crazy. But I thought that Harris Faulkner really owned one of her co-hosts of the 5 on crime statistics. So I want to show that and some other things as well. By the way, Gavin Newsom in California, what the Democrats are trying to do to redistrict California in retaliation to what's going on in Texas, is one of the most corrupt things I've ever seen. But before we get into that, I just want to say I am in my sister's studio right now, so that's why things look a little bit differently. So I just decided to come into her studio and use her stuff. So I'm in her office right now. So that's why there's paint. I'm not about to do some live painting or anything like that. Not today. So that's where I'm at. At one point, I am going to let her just like show you some of her things since I'm here. I'm hoping everything sounds okay. I see Kit Kat in the comments. Yeah. And so she said, she meant to watch my show yesterday and then it was gone. I just deleted it because the Wi-Fi was so messed up and I couldn't play any of the videos that I wanted to play, and I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't have time to sort of figure out what was the issue. So I just decided to go ahead and stream live today, and hopefully I can figure it out this weekend. So yeah, my sister so graciously allowed me to use her studio. So I'm going to let you guys take a peek at some of her stuff that she has going on. But before we jump into all that, I want to encourage you guys to go to blackteennews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation on the website because it just costs a stream on my side, all that good stuff you guys can support. I very much do appreciate it. You guys can also check out different merch that's available at blackteennews.com, like different t-shirts and so on. You guys can also check out my books that I've written. I have 2 nonfiction books, and I have Slay Your Fear, How to Overcome a Spirit of Fear. And I also have, of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion, which covers, rights and science, and it debunks a lot of the things that people try to bring up, when they bring up like, oh, there's an abortion in the Bible. Like, no, there's not. There's not a potion for an abortion. You don't understand that scripture, and all kinds of different stuff that I have to debunk, like life starts at first breath. I'm like, well, it literally doesn't say that. I've had people like argue with me and say, well, it literally says that. I'm like, it literally does not. And they're using the word literally. I'm like, it literally does not say that. And then they try to move the goalpost. So Well, looks like I'm sounding okay since Kit Kat's responding. Oh, thank you. She was making sure that YouTube wasn't just like destroying my stuff. Yeah, it was I was only on yesterday for like, I don't know, 20 minutes, and I was trying to figure it out. And we were kind of talking a little bit while I was trying to figure it out, but it was very fuzzy. I claimed that I looked like a fuzzy potato, and I couldn't play anything. Like, I would have tried to power through the fuzziness, but I literally couldn't play any of my video clips. And again, I'm excited to talk about the Smithsonian thing, and so I just decided to table it. So we'll talk about it today. But I hope that you'll humor me for a second. I'm going to go ahead, and if Tina is ready, I think she can hear me. She can hear me. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mute myself so there's no feedback. And I'm going to bring her up.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to show you some of my paintings that I have. These are some of my larger stuff. I usually paint smaller things. I'll show you guys that kind of stuff in a minute. This is an older painting. It's an oil painting, but I still love it. And it's one of Christina's favorites of one of my older things. These paintings up on the top row, these are paintings that are a part of painting party classes. That is something I offer on my website. So if you guys are interested in that kind of stuff, you can go to tinastexportraits.com. And here's just a couple more paintings. I love this painting. It's of Jesus just waiting for you to accept him. He's just in a field just waiting for you. This is a recent one that I've done. These fireflies are actually made out of rose petals, ground up rose petals that I had. So I think that's a pretty neat addition. And then now we're going to walk over to our tiny things. Here we have the creation of Adam. Oh no, I dropped them touching, but there's God and there's Adam. And then there's some fantasy and some anime and some famous characters. There's Beetlejuice, Mystique. You got William Dafoe as Green Goblin. You got Spider-Man, Mr. Fantastic, Wolverine. You got Jesus Christ, Doctor Who, and then we got go into some scenery. Got some winter scenes up here. And then it goes into some winter and some space stuff, and then some foresty things, some abstract art, John Wick, Jensen Ackles. And then you got some tropical scenes. Lots of tropical scenes. I paint a lot of. They sell well, so there's a lot of them. And then this is a reproduction of Haystack's Dawn. If you know the painting, then you know. And oh, here's another painting that will be available as an option for painting party classes. And here's something I am currently working on. It is Jesus walking on the water towards his disciples. So I've been working on this one for a minute, and you can see in the back, I got a giant painting back there. I don't want to disturb Christina in the other room, but yeah, I've got a lot of stuff on my site. Thanks for giving me a minute to talk about my stuff. So I'll let you guys go back to black tea.
All right. Thank you, Tina. Yeah, so you guys can go to Tina's. Let me put her website up for a second. I guess I should have did that while she was up, but I don't have one actually. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. tinastexportraits.com. So yeah, that's her website. So I had already like threw this out there, but let me go ahead and throw it out again. I think it would be neat if we did like an online painting party with each other. So I think what I would do is I'd use like a software like StreamYard. I give people who want to participate the link, and so I would invite them into like we don't have to do it live or whatever, but it would be like a 2-hour session, and so she'd be teaching us how to paint. I haven't painted in a very long time, so I don't know how good I am. I was pretty decent in high school. High school was a while ago, so yeah. I think it would be neat. I'd have to pick which one, we would do collectively and figure out like everybody getting like the same kind of canvas and paint and stuff. So we'll figure that out. And when we do, you know, because some of you have expressed interest in that, but that's a cool little thing that, you know, I think would be interesting. So yeah, just, you know, Tina, again, she is the artist who drew the hands of God here. Reaching out to the little baby hand on my book. She also did the artwork for my bigger book that is we're still working on. Like it's done. We're just doing some different printing stuff right now. Just making sure when it prints it looks good. I did the Amazon one, so now I'm like looking at the hardbacks and stuff, and then we'll put up for sale. We're getting pretty close to like a pre-order launch date and stuff, but I'll let you guys know when all that will be. So anyway, thank you for humoring me and being a proud big sister, but let's get to the news. Let's get to the tea. So I'm gonna start with Julian Michaels because I want to talk about this. I'm dying to talk about this and re-mention this again. So Julian Michaels went on CNN. So this clip's going to be like 3 minutes, 30 seconds. And they were talking about Donald Trump and how they're looking at the Smithsonian and different exhibits that they have. And Julian Michaels is going to try to explain that some of them are just so focused on like racial grievance kind of stuff or oppressed versus oppressor sort of matrix that they're leaving out important details about different things and history and nuance and etc. And they don't really want to let her speak. She does do a thread on Twitter to explain some of the stuff that they wouldn't let her really talk about. But I just think it's fascinating because the Smithsonian, you go to a museum or something, or sometimes you watch a documentary, you see go to a museum or whatever, and you just assume that it's only like professionals who are going to be good actors trying to teach you stuff, right? But if you think about sometimes you go to school or your kids go to school, you might have a teacher who's teaching things straight by the book, but you might have teachers who are very skewed in the information they present, you know, and injecting their feelings. Maybe they're going off of, you know, wandered from the curriculum and they're injecting their own feelings and opinions onto stuff. And they're trying to raise up little liberal bots to not question anything except what they are teaching and making folks really, really woke. If those people can exist there, why don't you think that those people aren't existing in college? And if they're raising up these other professionals, if they go and become, you know, historians or people who work at museums or put together the exhibits or they work in the government, why don't you think that there might be other people who might have a skewed sort of perception? So Donald Trump trying to wrangle these people in, I don't see why people can't understand why that might be a necessity. But you have to just, I'm not saying that we should just take their word for it, but we can just look at the different stuff like Julian Michaels decided to do. But she seems to be the only one really prepared for the segment. So I'm going to go ahead and play that for you guys.
He's gone into the Smithsonian. He's effectively now has some random person deciding what is appropriate for the Smithsonian to teach in terms of American history, things that don't offend parts of the MAGA base, right? So we're now literally reviewing parts of American history and parts of American culture to make sure it comports with dear leader and what the MAGA
Can we address
wants.
some of those things that are in there? Because have you looked at some of the things that are being reviewed?
Slavery was a bad thing that was to talk about.
Okay.
Like
he's not whitewashing slavery. So
he's not?
He's not. No,
okay.
He's not. And you cannot tie imperialism and racism and slavery to just one race, which is pretty much what every single exhibit does. But let's talk about the fact that when you
anti-slavery,
let's talk about the fact.
I mean, slavery in America was.
Do you realize that only less than 2% of white Americans owned slaves?
It was a system of white supremacy.
You realize that slavery is thousands of years old?
White people were.
Do you know who was the first race to try to end slavery? Well, what's controversial?
I'm very surprised.
This is an extraordinary exercise in historical revisionism.
I'm really surprised.
Do you realize that,
Julian, I'm surprised that you're trying to litigate who was the beneficiary of slavery and
I'm
who
not.
was not.
What I'm trying to tell you
in
is
the
that
context of American history.
Okay.
In the context of American history, what are you saying is incorrect by saying that it was white people oppressing black people?
Every single thing is like, oh, no, this is all because white people bad. And that's just not the truth. Like, for example, every single exhibit, I have a list of every single one. Like, people migrated from Cuba because white people bad. Not because of past. Yes, no, it's in there. That's what I'm saying. You don't actually know what's in there. Do you know that when you walk in the front door, the first thing you see is the gay flag?
Jillian, you have a lot of stuff in front of
Yeah, I
you.
do,
What
because I don't,
exactly
because here's the thing.
are you talking about?
Okay, I'll give you an example.
Yeah, please.
There's one called Change Your Game, right? This has been an installation there. Is gender testing fair in sports? Does that, and then it goes on to talk about how it's complex to do gender testing in sports. It's not complex. It's basic science. That's untrue. It's XX chromosome, XY chromosome. That's sports. Is it fair to have biological men competing against biological women in sports? No. But why is this in the Smithsonian? So it's been completely captured.
First of all, I don't.
And
think
it's totally partisan.
First of all, we don't have time to litigate
of
all of this.
Of course we don't, because then you're going to lose the argument. If everything is racialized, just like you're trying to do to me now.
Excuse me.
It's like, I can't believe you're trying to suggest, that slavery
just to
is
be
a good
clear,
thing.
you brought up race.
No,
this was a conversation about the arts.
She did bring up the slavery thing, but Abby did try to play a little game. And she's like, "Oh, I can't believe that you want to litigate who is a beneficiary of slavery." That's not what Julian said. That's not what Julian said. She said that she was complaining because all the exhibits are just so focused on racial things, and in a vacuum, you're like, what are you talking about? Like, obviously there was a racial component to this stuff, but we're all white people bad, like, period? Well, of course not. There's abolitionists who are obviously white people who fought and died in the Civil War to overturn slavery. Many white people. If you watch the film Glory, which I had seen bits and pieces of it before, but I hadn't seen the whole thing before, and I decided to go ahead and watch it because I am like in the midst of putting together a new like historical fiction book in my like series and stuff, and so I'm like, okay, let me watch Glory, because there's no like scene from the Fort Wagner stuff in the book, but it's talked about. So I just kind of wanted to watch that. I'm like reading other historical like stuff, research. I'm not just watching movies, but I just want to put that out there. So I decided to watch Glory, and Denzel Washington is in the film, and he's a younger man, in the film, and he just has an attitude with like everybody, and he's the troublemaker. And you have Morgan Freeman, who was a grave digger, and he became a soldier and ends up getting promoted through the ranks and stuff. And he ends up like fussing at Denzel. I think it was at the moment when Denzel was giving this Freeman a very hard time. He's like, "Oh, you may walk like the white man and talk like the white man, but you'll never be the white man." And he made like monkey noises at him and stuff. So then finally, he got mad, and the guy was going to fight Denzel Washington. And so Morgan Freeman got in the middle of them, and he's just like, what is your problem? Like, you can't fight the whole world. And he's just like, so many white people died for these battles. I know, because I had to dig their graves. So definitely, slavery, people who try to deny that slavery was a major component to like the Civil War and the Union, and the Confederacy and people rebelling and breaking up the nation. Like, you can go read this, the states, their declarations when they decided to leave. Slavery is in there. So obviously that's a big deal. But she mentions that, a lot of people couldn't afford to have slaves, didn't own slaves. But there's people in the North who are ambivalent about the plight of the slaves. And that's why something like Uncle Tom's Cabin made such a significant difference culturally. But of course, you know, the moral of every story can't just be that white people are bad. So anyway, this is just, it's just funny because in a vacuum, you might be like, Julian is overreacting. But Julian has looked at the other exhibits, and I've seen their whiteness infographic that I'm about to show you. But let me go ahead and play the rest of this out, and then we'll look at the infographic, the infamous infographic.
And you brought up race.
It isn't.
You brought up.
But the whole point of this is that the issue
you brought up slavery, and you brought up the question of whether. You brought up the question of whether or not slavery in the United States is about race. The answer is
no,
yes.
I did not say
in the United States.
Don't straw man my argument, because that's not what I said.
So what are you
brought up
talking about?
Slavery, and what I was talking about is that this isn't really about that. When you make every single
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. The other person, I believe, did bring that up, and she was responding because they were saying that Trump was like, ooh, slavery. Yeah. And another thing, like Democrats will say all the time, like, oh, Republicans don't want to learn true history. And I like history. Again, writing historical fiction, fantasy novels and stuff. I like learning about it, reading about it, watching period pieces and stuff. And Republicans are the good guys in those stories. So why would we want to learn about honest history? So we can debunk the stuff that Democrats try to teach their people when they want to whitewash history so they don't look as bad.
exhibit about white imperialism when it isn't relevant at all, that is a problem. So when you're talking about Cubans leaving Cuba and you make it about white people bad, that's not accurate.
Can I just
Okay.
say,
That's my point.
All right, we're going to move on from that.
Okay, so that's the segment. We're going to go ahead and look at the tweet that she gave. Okay, so she said, okay, so far for anyone who's watching me on CNN tonight, battling out with Abby Phillips' show, this is the one of the Smithsonian exhibits I was referencing. Trump is not trying to erase slavery by suggesting some of the installations there are inaccurate and biased. Notice how it omits the central fact that Cubans fled Castro's communist regime, instead framing the crisis solely as the result of U.S. support for dictators, a misleading oversimplification. While the U.S. did back Batista as an unpopular and corrupt leader, mass immigration began after Castro seized power in 1959. Cuba became a one-party communist state allied with Soviet Union. Political opponents, journalists, and business owners were jailed, executed, or driven into exile. Private property was nationalized. Dissent was criminalized. Like the rest of the exhibit, this framing reduces a complex history to a narrative in which the United States alone destabilized the developing world. I oppose interventionist U.S. foreign policy, but this is not an honest or complete portrayal of what happened in Cuba, period. You know, the thing about Julian Michaels is that, I mean, she's not a crazy liberal, I guess, but she's a Democrat and stuff, I don't know if she still considers herself to be one, but, she's been having a lot of common sense conversations. I think there's things like that there's a lot of things we would definitely disagree on. But she's going on here to say, hey, just actually look at this stuff. There's reasons why Trump is pointing out that this stuff is biased. Now, an interesting thing, even before I show you guys the infographic, the first time I had even heard of Margaret Sanger, I believe it's the first time I ever heard of Margaret Sanger. I saw a video that a group, it might have been live action, I don't know. it was a pro-life group or whatever, put out a video doing details on her. And the reason why they were highlighting her is because the Smithsonian was doing an exhibit about her and highlighting her, uplifting her, etc. And so it was just going through her racist history and the eugenic sort of talking points that she had and how she wanted to limit the population of, minorities and the poor and who she deemed as feeble-minded, etc. And how, they pay ministers, Black ministers, to like get on board with what she wanted. Now, she didn't support using abortion in the way to like limit the population. She wasn't into it like that as like other people who took over Planned Parenthood in the future, who are also eugenicists, by the way. But she did want to limit the population of minorities through birth control. Like she wanted to control the human weeds. So that's how I first was introduced to Margaret Sanger, was because the Smithsonian was doing an exhibit. And so they're just like, hey, we should be alarmed about what they're pushing here and tell them to like take this down or whatever. So anyway, let me get to the thing that I'm like just so jazzed to talk about. So in the year of 2020, that was besides COVID, there's BLM, Black Lives Matter, and people were talking about white privilege and like whiteness being bad and all this different stuff. So the African American History Museum decided to put out an infographic. They had like a webpage and stuff. They ended up taking that down, like the infographic and stuff, but the internet is forever. And I certainly saved my copy of it. But they did an infographic on a whiteness in America, white culture. Okay. And so when I told my cousins about this, and they just believed it was a parody. Like they just could not believe that folks actually like made this. And so these are things that are indicative of whiteness. Now, other races can have these different attributes of whiteness, but that just means that basically they are impacted and affected, I guess, from these different things. Okay. So white culture, the idea that the individual is the primary unit, self-reliance, that's white culture. Independence and autonomy is highly valued / rewarded. That's white culture. Tell all the people who are so pro-abortion that individuals assume to be in control of their environment, that you get what you deserve. That's white culture. Like you can go out there and kind of like you are responsible. You can make your own destiny, the family structure, the nuclear family, father and mother, couple kids. The husband is the breadwinner and head of the household. They say that's white culture. The wife is the homemaker and subordinate to the husband. The children should have their own rooms and be independent. They say that's white culture. Objective, rational, linear thinking. That's my favorite one. I think if you have objective, rational, linear thinking, like, why don't we think rationally about this? That's your whiteness showing. That's your whiteness. Like, we can't think critically now. Cause and effect relationships, quantitative emphasis, history based on Northern European immigrants, experience in the United States, heavy focus on British Empire. First of all, the British Empire is pretty darn fascinating. I love a good period piece. And when I watch different period pieces, I'm like, ooh, did this happen? This happened? Oh, okay. Well, let me look up this person because they mentioned this person, and I'll start going down different rabbit holes. And then like not retain a lot of it. Primacy of Western Greek, Roman, Judeo-Christian tradition. Work ethic, they say hard work is key to success. That's whiteness. Work before play. If you didn't meet your goals, you didn't work hard enough. That's whiteness. Religion, Christianity is the norm. That's a sign of whiteness. Anything other than Judeo-Christian tradition is foreign. No tolerance for deviation of the single God concept. Now that's really wild to me, because Christianity, is not originated from white people. Like, I know they say that's a white man's religion. It's not. It's funny because woke people will try to be like, well, Jesus was black or something, which isn't the case. But but then they'll be like adamant, like, oh, people think he's white. Like, who thinks he's white? People don't think he's white. But then it's like the white man's religion, even though his disciples were instructed to go everywhere and teach the gospel. I follow someone on Twitter. I don't think he's Nigerian. I want to say maybe he's Ethiopian or something. I don't know. But he, when people try to say that, oh, like Africa was colonized and they made people, convert to this white man's religion, he's always there with the facts to say, hey, no, Africa, like, they brought this stuff over there before they were bringing it over in Europe. Like, what are you talking about? Like, some of the oldest churches in the world is in Africa. Like, what are you talking about? But then to say to deviate from a single God concept, what about the Muslims? They only believe there's one God. Like the Abrahamic faiths, like you have Judaism and Christianity, and then, Muslims came after the fact and tried to appropriate all this stuff. But they believe in a single God concept. They try to mock Christians for the Trinity because they say that we have three gods, which we don't, but they don't get it. So that's what they say. So they only believe in a single God concept. So what do you mean that is a sign of whiteness? That's one of the most bizarre things about this, is that so many things that are just so kind of normal in Western culture in the United States of America, they just try to pin it on being whiteness. And the reason why they want to do that is because they want those things to be looked at as bad, and whiteness they've been framing as bad, because if you're white, then that's, privilege, and that's when it's the oppressor-oppressed matrix. You have to look after the other, and the oppressor is always the white. And so if they associate Christianity with being white, then somehow Christianity is bad. If they associate going to work on time as being white, then that's bad. And how dare you be angry that a Black woman showed up 45 minutes late to work? Those are white standards and white expectations. Like, how dare you? Like, how dare you think that things like planning for the future, even though I'll be a little like, you don't think Asian families plan for the future? They're like, no, well, that's whiteness. Linear rational thinking. Like, how dare you expect people to think rationally and how they're educated here in the United States or other places? Like, those are just signs of whiteness. How dare you expect other people to live that way, do those things? It's just really bizarre. Wealth status, power, wealth equals worth. Your job is who you are. Respecting authority, that's white culture. Heavy value on ownership of goods, space, property. So now we're just like straight up communism, right? If you believe in capitalism, that's just whiteness. Again, like, they're taking things that are just normal and good and just associating it with whiteness. So people will just be revolted and be like, okay, well, I'm not a part of that. Those are just white expectations and whatnot. So yeah, people value their property. That there's nothing wrong. The future following rigid time schedules, time viewed as a commodity, aesthetics, they said, based on European culture, steak and potatoes, bland is best, women's beauty based on blonde, thin, Barbie, sort of thing. This one is really insane to me. Then attractiveness is based on his economic status, power, and so if you are attracted to men who aren't brokies, then that's whiteness. That's whiteness. You want a man who got a job. That's whiteness. But they also have, like, again, intellect on there too. Like, do you know? I want an attractive man. Like, and they say power. Like, I'm not saying he gotta, you know, be like Dr. Doom or something. But you know, I like a man with some ambition. That's sexy to me. But apparently, like, that's whiteness, guys. Holidays based on Christian religion, based on white history, and male leaders, which is crazy to me. Like, when you think of something like Columbus Day, which people want to get rid of and, you know, make it Indigenous Peoples Days or something in retaliation, Columbus Day was actually created to pander to Italian Americans, actually. So there's at one point, like, no matter what you do to appeal to people, eventually it's not going to be enough, because it's going to come full circle, and they're just going to, eventually that thing is going to be offensive to somebody. Justice based on English common law, that you protect property and entitlements. Again, they're just communists, which makes sense when you think about Julian Michaels and her complaining about how they're altering kind of this history with Cuba, or not telling the full story. That intent counts in justice. That's really wild to me. Why wouldn't intent matters? I mean, it all matters what you do, like what actual crime was committed. But yeah, your intent when that happened, you know, plays a role. Competition to be number one, that's whiteness. Win at all cost, winner loser dichotomy. And let me see if there's any other decision making. That's funny. Communication King's English, avoiding conflict, and okay. Don't show emotion, don't discuss personal life, and be polite. Be polite is the last one. Those are the signs of whiteness. Yeah. It's funny how it's a white man's religion, but white men were the ones setting Christians on fire or sending them to the lions. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. Really bizarre. So anyway, with that information being presented to you, do you think it is possible that, yeah, maybe some folks who've been handling things at these museums don't have the best interest at heart for people going to these exhibits? Because you go there, you're learning stuff, you're reading stuff, and you don't, do you question it too much? Like, if you didn't really know and you're in a museum, you learn something, like, oh, that's interesting. You expect things to be like true and kind of telling it to you straight when you go to a museum. You don't expect sort of this woke projection. And I guess, FYI, be aware. And it makes me think, like, how bad things must be in general. Like, Netflix put out like a documentary thing. It was like a documentary, but they filmed some stuff, you know, for creative license or whatever. But there was some stuff about, I think, Commodus, and the things that they put in there, and was having like live action acted out for the sake of the storytelling during the document, didn't make any sense. It was so far removed from history. I'm like, how can you do this for a documentary? I know there's like no law stopping people, but like, why not just make something up? Why not just do an actual drama piece with your historical fiction well, not fantasy, but like just make alternate history or whatever. If you're just gonna make stuff up, but people will sit down and watch documentary and be like, oh, I think that's true. You got to fact check all this crap that comes out. It's so bizarre. But anyway, yeah, Trump is right to think that there's some biased activists out there in the world, for sure. And it is absolutely unfortunate. Anyway, moving on. I want to show you guys a segment from Fox News because one of their Democrats who are usually on the 5 that they have on the payroll decided, it was Marie Harf. She decided to try to put it out there that Republican cities are, the ones laden with crime. Now, I think the people will try to be like, oh, Republicans, they have the most crime or whatever in certain places, but they're trying to say the state. And it's like, okay, but they're blue cities, blue mayors, blue DAs and prosecutors and all that kind of stuff going on. So, you can't just blame the governor because it's a red state and not the people who are local on the ground and so on. So Harris Faulkner just totally did a fact check on this lady. That was just beautiful.
Did by all of these other Democrat cities that need help too. Well, question number one is a lot of the cities with the most crime in the country are led by Republicans. This is not just a Democratic city problem. So the president doesn't talk.
And she said cities. She didn't say states right there. She said cities. So
about those, but there are a lot around the country in that list of murders, violent crimes that are Republican led. Number two, I've lived in Washington since 2006, in the Washington, D.C. area and in Washington itself. Of course, we should have fewer carjackings, fewer crime. I believe that. You don't put a federal agent checkpoint on 14th Street in Washington, D.C., which is what happened last night. That is not the locus of crime in Washington, D.C. That's where, senators and congresspeople and people that work in the White House go to dinner. They put a federal checkpoint on 14th Street and stopped every car. That is not actually addressing the crime problem in Washington. So while I hope they make Washington safer, I hope they make all of these places safer. That's not how to do it. That's performative. And the third point I would make, as a Washingtonian for many decades, is that it is very rich to say we are going to charge the sandwich thrower with a felony. When I was there on January 6th, and all of those people that assaulted police officers got pardoned, not just the nonviolent.
Okay, I'm going to let this play out, but I do want to just so they point out about this sandwich thrower. Why would you do that, first of all? Like throwing a sandwich at like law enforcement folks, but that person also worked for the DOJ. Like why do you think that you would get away with that? Why do you think you should get away with that? Like throwing food, that is so childish. And even as a child, you get like really scolded for doing that. Like you don't throw food. That you just get chewed up like by parents or whoever when you do something that childish. So just being a grown adult and throwing your sandwich is just really bizarre to me. But to be a DOJ employee, and I guess he was going off and all this other stuff, and because he was going off on them, someone had their camera geared up, and that's why it was like caught on camera. But if someone's willing to do that, I don't know how long they're going to go to jail. Like he could get up to like 8 years for it, but I don't think that, a jury or whatever is going to end up giving him 8 years for throwing a sandwich, but certainly losing your job would be appropriate. Just freaking nuts. As far as the January 6th stuff, I think that they probably would have looked at each and every case and just pardoned the ones who were non-violent if Biden hadn't done the blanket pardon stuff. And I just don't think that they wanted to be bombarded with January 6th stuff all the time, those questions and eating up whatever. So they just should have brought like, your pardon, get out of here. And if people, you know, well, not if people were violent and like hitting police officers and different people with like poles and other stuff like that, you know, I think that they should have done time, and they did do time. I don't know how long everybody was sentenced for or whatever, but I don't think that they would have just blanket pardoned everyone if Biden wasn't just passing them out like candy. And I think they felt permission to be able to be like, I wash my hands of this. So that's just my explanation of what I think went on there. But the come on, you're working for the DOJ and you're throwing a sandwich. But look, that's not even why I want to show you guys a segment. Let's go on.
The ones, not just the ones that went into the Capitol. Everyone, including the ones that went after police officers, got pardoned. So don't tell me we care, that this administration cares about protecting police officers when they did not care about those on January 6th.
Respectfully, can we just stay?
But they got pardoned. No, those were police officers.
I just want to say,
and they got
I want to talk about DC for a second.
But that was in DC. That was in DC. Those were DC police officers.
Can I just start with the fact checking on
those
what you said?
Those were DC police officers.
So the top 10 cities for murder in 2025, St. Louis, Missouri. Who's leading it?
Where's cities like Memphis,
hold
Nashville?
on. Memphis is second. You said
Memphis.
Nashville.
You said a vast majority, a lot of. You said those were okay. Top 10.
Okay.
St. Louis, Memphis. One for your column. Baltimore, Detroit, New Orleans, Little Rock.
Right.
Two for your column. Two out of the 10.
Who's the mayor of New Orleans?
Okay, listen. Oakland.
That one that was in first class headed to France.
Oakland.
That got
Cleveland,
corruption charges.
Cleveland,
Tacoma, and Kansas City.
So how many of those are red states? Ohio's a red state.
Not the
majority
mayor of the city.
You're talking about the cities.
You were talking about the city. I'm just listening to what you said.
Harris, I said cities that are red. Some of those are, and almost all of those are in states that are led by Republicans.
But who's in charge of the city?
The city runs their criminal justice system.
Not
Furthermore, that's what they do. The district attorney is the one who makes the call as to what's going to be prosecuted.
The president was right. The majority of those cities.
You're missing a major point. You're using murder as the metric. Let's go to New York City, where murders are down, all right? And that's despite the criminal justice reforms. What we're talking about here is the quality of life of the people who live here. The city has fallen to ruin, and that stuff just doesn't get enforced.
DC has a 6 times higher homicide rate than New York City.
It's Emily's segment, and I'm going to ask her for grace to give an example. Is that okay? Okay. A gunman has opened fire, and this is just recently reported not too long ago. It was under Biden's watch. A gunman opened fire outside of a restaurant in an upscale area of Washington, D.C., about a mile from the White House. Do you remember that night? Because you were living there, and diners at outside tables ran for cover. Look, this didn't just happen yesterday. This has been going on, and it's been a TikTok, which is why during the time that the president was running as a candidate, he was saying, look, there are problems that have been building. So this is a good example because it didn't just happen yesterday. It happened on Biden's watch. And I think it's worth bringing these things up because these are real felt crimes. And the majority of those cities are Democrat-led. I read you the top 10. I think you had 3.
All right, guys, we got it.
So with them discussing murder, I didn't think Harris Faulkner needed to murder her like that, but man, she did the thing. I'm just gonna pretend like a lot of those cities like weren't Democrat led. She said Detroit was like that. I don't live in Detroit, but my mom was from the East Side. Years ago, when we were going to go visit my grandmother, my dad and my mom was starting to get out of the car, and they both said to each other, "Make sure you like the cars." And that's just like, "This is where you from?" And she's like, "Well, I ain't been here in a while." like they still know the area, like where she ended up like moving into like a facility for the like the elderly and stuff, like different apartments for the elderly. But before that, her house that they had, it was rough, and it probably wasn't always so, but unfortunately, things really changed about Detroit over the years. But yeah, who you vote for, who becomes the mayor, and your different police chiefs, and the DAs, and how they handle the crime, the judges, the sort of sentences that they give out, all those things matter. And you have to look at the local stuff. People are so focused on who ends up being the president, and that's it. Ideally, the federal government would be kind of so small that you care when there's war looming and things like that, but like things that they might do day to day, like we shouldn't be so invested in Donald Trump like all the time, and Obama and whoever. But it's funny because when Trump is like, okay, I'm going to shrink this thing, or I'm going to limit regulations here, and businesses are going to be able to do more here, and so on, and I'm going to put the power back in the states when it comes to education and all kinds of different stuff, people will flip out and be like, oh my gosh, she's exercising such authority. Like, no, he's trying to give more power back to the people and actually limit some of his ability. Now, does he do things like executive orders and things like that? Yeah, I think he does. Too many of them, because at the end of the day, those things can be reversed, because Joe Biden got in and he just started reversing stuff. So I want to see more legislation passed. And I don't know how much they're actually going to legislatively get done, like in his term and stuff. I don't know how the midterms are exactly going to turn out. And they exhausted, I think, a lot of political capital on the big, beautiful bill. So, I don't know how many wins he's going to get in court. I mean, he's had a lot of wins in court, but things like birthright citizenship, I don't know how that will go. I think they have an interesting argument, but I just don't know if the courts are ready to kind of jump that far on this stuff. I don't know. But long term, they are going to have to actually pass more things if he wants what he does to be more long lasting. But DC's been dangerous, and people kind of downplaying it, pretending like that's not really the case, is so bizarre. Like yesterday, not yesterday, I think the day before yesterday, I played you guys a clip of Simone Sanders, who used to be like on Bernie's campaign team, and then she was working for like Biden, Kamala Harris. She was asked by Morning Joe if, more cops on the police. More cops on the streets meant, things are going to be safer. And she said, "I'm a Black woman, like in America. No, that doesn't mean we're going to be safer," which was really bizarre. And I went into a rant saying, I call the police, and I want the police to show up within 5 minutes of when I call them. I depend on the police. And people pointed out some other stuff with Simone Sanders to kind of just showcase how silly her narrative and stuff was. For example, she had tweeted, "Propaganda will have you believing people who have never set foot in your community over your own eyes and ears." So, a lot of narratives about DC and is it bad and how bad the crime is, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of people talking about it. But Matt Whitlock, he's like, "Isn't this your husband?" And so there was an article, and I guess her husband was quoted. Sean Townsend with the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington said, "Violence is so regular. In one neighborhood that one of our members paid thousands of dollars to break her restaurant lease and move into a safer area." So she did reply, and she's like, "Yes, that was 2 years ago during a hearing about what policy could address the issue. The policy is an appropriate response. What does this have to do with the federal law enforcement in the streets of our city? Don't bother to answer. This is a rhetorical question." And he said, don't bother to answer. This is a rhetorical question. It's quite literally not. This person was a senior communications advisor to Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. Yeah, I'll never get over Simone Sanders after the 2016 Trump win, and it was on CNN. She's been on like these different news networks for a while, but there was some like hate crimes against some white people that were going on, and I guess retaliation his win or whatever. But there was one guy who was being dragged by a car, and he was being attacked and stuff. And so someone on CNN was talking about it, and then she's just like, "Oh, poor white people." I'm like, "What the heck?" And she just continued on, and being called upon to commentate on things. And I always kind of thought she was a bit of a racist activist, so on. But the data shows that people have been concerned about crime. And that's not something that Democrats can just pretend isn't the case. So on MSNBC, they actually talked about this issue. Morning Joe, pointed out that there's been reporting about how people feel on the issue of crime. So let me go ahead and show you guys that one.
The answer to this problem for Democrats is not, oh, everything's okay, there's nothing to see here, move along. Oh, Washington has dropped 24% or whatever in crime. Well, let me give you some other numbers. The Washington Post took a poll at late April, early May. 91% of Washington residents say crime is a problem. 91%. 51%, it is an extremely serious problem. And John Heilman, we've had people before put this in racial terms. And this is what I must say, this is one thing that I think Democrats have gotten so wrong about crime. So wrong about crime. Let me just read the Washington Post here. There are stark divides among lines of race and income in the poll, with Black residents and lower income residents significantly more worried about crime than white residents and those with higher incomes. As they were last year, Black women are among the most concerned, with 65% saying crime is a very or extremely serious issue, compared with 82% who said the same thing last year.
Yeah, so people are aware that crime is bad. I've been to DC a lot. I can't say that something has ever happened to me specifically there. I have been concerned in areas and very much looking out to make sure my cars were there still, where I parked them, like going to different hotels, or when I visited my sister when she used to live in the Navy Yard, that's where a couple of years ago there was that Uber driver who was killed when some teens tried to tase him. Well, they did tase him, and they tried to steal his car, and it crashed. That was horrific. And just the fact that some young girls would do that to somebody is just insane. Just absolutely insane. But yeah, crime in DC has been bad, and it's been bad for a while. As a matter of fact, let me show you this clip of Joe Biden back in the day on the Senate floor talking about how bad crime was, that he admitted that he did not stop at stop lights and just kept running them because of the crime.
Driving home, my staff who lives here in the Hill reminded me, don't stop at a stoplight until I'm out of town. If I see a red light late at night, since there's very little traffic, slow up at the other block so I never come to a full stop except in the middle of the block because of carjackings. Stopping at a light, people standing in a corner, walking up with a gun. Driving home, my staff who lives here in the Hill.
Yeah, so I've heard people say that about some areas of Detroit, and I heard stories of cops like telling people we're visiting, like, what are you doing? Don't stop in this area. Like, keep going. There was I wasn't in Detroit, but I was in I was out late not last night, but a few nights ago. I was parked at like a 7-Eleven, and this guy came up and he like made a motion like he wanted money for food or whatever. But I'm alone in my car. It's late. And I'm like, nope. I'm just like I pulled out apart. I started driving away. I'm like, you can't just be coming up on women's windows. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you need. Like, unless you're telling me there's an axe murder or something chasing me, or which you can point or something, like, or yell it. But sorry, not rolling down my window. Not rolling down my window. There's some angry people, an angry person in the comments. I thought this comment was kind of funny. You bars are so funny, all caps. Do you really think it matters? Rather, black people are red or blue. I think it's supposed to be whether. Both parties are racist. What would it matter if both parties were racist? They're still going to implement different policies, and you should pick the ones that are going to be more beneficial to you and your community. So even if they are both racist, let's just say they are, you still got to vote for somebody, and there's going to be someone who's going to be usually better than the other. Like, you bars only offer KK Christianity as a solution to the ills of black people. Again, why are you so down on the brown people's religion, man? And guess what? Christianity is the answer to all the ills. That's why I showed the comment, just to say, like, yes, you need Jesus. You absolutely need Jesus. Jesus is the only way. Jesus is the answer. Jesus is how you can get not just joy in your life, but a peace that passeth all understanding. I invite you to research, to know that the word of God is true, that Jesus did die on the cross for your sins, and he did rise in 3 days, that the gospels are reliable, and you can go ahead and do that research for yourself. But yes, you need Jesus. There's so many ills in our society that could be solved by people walking in righteousness. Like, so many like socioeconomic things, can stem from just the family home being broken up and the father not being there, or baby mama culture. I saw a TikTok today of a woman. She was going off about, she's like, if you're 23, 24 and you got 3 kids, your life is about to be so hard. It's about to be so hard. And somebody stitched it, and they're like, I am that 23-year-old with 3 kids, and she is right. It is so hard. And she even showed her paperwork from coming out of the hospital, because she tried to end her life at one point. She talked about how hard it is. She doesn't have any help. And I don't know what's up with her man. Apparently she only got 1 baby daddy. Now, why are you unmarried and messing around with this man? You got 3 kids, and it's messed up people having the multiple ones too, but it's like, at some point, y'all got to let these dudes go. At some point. But she was just talking about how hard it is, and other people in the comments were talking about how hard it is. Now, even if you're married, kids can be a challenge, but being a single mom with 3 kids and you 23, and she's like, it's hard. Nobody wants to hire me because I can't work on weekends, and I got to work all these weird hours because I got to pick up my kids. So I'm just doing DoorDash. And so, I don't doubt her that her life is hard, but she should have kept herself until she found a husband and then started her family through that union. I'm not saying that life will not be hard doing all the things that you're quote unquote supposed to do. But there are different societal ills that exist because we are disobedient to the word of God. So yes, you do need Jesus. And that is the answer. That is the answer. I get on here, I talk politics. It's fun to talk about. I want to initiate different political changes, but I'm optimistic as I am about the state of the world and how things can be better, because I know at the end of the day, I'm praying for revival. I'm praying for people to know God. And so that's the best way that we can get people to act better, do better, is if they follow that path. So I thank you for this opportunity to preach to you. Yes, you do need Jesus, and that is what I offer to you. I invite you to do that, and guess what? He wants to have communion with you. That's why he did the whole dying on the cross thing. So Jesus is the way. So anyway, that's the show for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. I want to thank again Tina for being in the studio. Hopefully you guys check out her work and go check out her paintings and stuff. I'll pop up her website. She's got so many cool little teeny tiny paintings that make good gifts. They make good things to put on your desk. Usually where I'm sitting right now, she usually live streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She does do painting classes. I am planning to have her do a painting class with you guys. So we'll get that figured out, the logistics and all that stuff, and a date. And we'll have to pick out a picture that we want to paint together. But it'll be a lot of fun. If you're interested in that, I'll keep you updated. But I think it'll be fun for sure. I also encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com to check out my content on my website, articles, videos, etc. And if you like what I do here, you guys can leave a donation on the website because it does cost to stream and run my site. All that so you guys can support it. Very much appreciate it. Appreciate you guys. And you guys can also check out different merch and so on. So anyway, God bless you guys. Be safe. I know we didn't have a lot of shows this week because different, things, life happened and bad Wi-Fi and stuff, but glad to see you guys today and enjoy your weekend. And I will see you on Monday.